Hi, everyone, and welcome to this panel, which is titled Quick Takes, Youth Weigh In on Instagram for Kids, Parents' Screen Rules, and More. And this panel is just kind of what the title says. These Instagram for Kids is a huge topic of discussion, especially with the Facebook files breaking. Screen time rules with parents is sort of a perennial top issue. And we see a lot of adults talking about these issues increasingly, but I don't think we're hearing enough from the youth. So the whole idea of this panel is to gather several people from their late teens, early 20s, and to just get their perspective. We have a fantastic panel here with us today. And without further ado, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Seth.
Hey everyone, I'm Seth Bunev and I'm 24 years old. I'm an outdoor educator and I'm the author of Screenfarers, Nurturing Deliberate Action in a Digital World. And I'm excited to be here with you all.
Hi everyone, my name is Adin. I'm a 17-year-old senior in high school in the Bay Area, and I'm the co-chair of Lookup's Teen Leadership Council. So very excited to get into this discussion.
Hi guys, I'm Lucy and I'm a senior at Indiana University and I'm currently living in England. I co-chair the Interfaith work group at Fairplay's Screentime Action Network and did an internship with them this summer.
Hi everyone, my name is Leong. I'm from Hawaii, but I'm currently in Boston, Massachusetts, studying at Babson College. I'm the founder of an organization called Virtual Student Experiences, which is a fully virtual career resource for students to learn about different careers before they go into college.
And hi everyone, I am Kaitlyn. I'm a master's student at King's College of London, and I'm a former Lookup.live social innovation grant winner.
Thank you all, and I will introduce myself. I'm Paer. I work at Fairplay at the Screentime Children's Action Network as the network coordinator. I previously worked with a state senator in Hawaii, which is my home state, on legislation regarding information on screen time to parents. And I also had a show on Think Tech Hawaii called Screentime Reset. And with that, we're going to jump into our first question. Basically, the format is I'm going to ask a question. Each panelist is going to have 1.5 to 2 minutes to answer. And if I do this, that's just me giving them a heads up that they have 30 seconds left. So with that, the first question is about Instagram for Kids. What do you think about Facebook's project creating Instagram for children ages 8 through 12? What impact do you think this would have on children 8 to 12 years old? Starting with you, Seth.
I think as a lot of people have kind of pointed out, that a big part of the impact this will have is getting young kids into these habitual uses of social media earlier and more, which will make it more difficult for them to have self-control later on. One thing that we know really clearly about how habits form and how learning happens is that those habits are never going to fully go away and they'll have to deal with it. And it'll be more challenging than if they started later, if they're trying to cut back on their use. And also, it's just going to give Facebook and just the kind of social media world another avenue to shape their identity and in ways that likely will, I mean, as we've seen with Instagram, can result in a lot of mental health issues, kind of body image issues. And even beyond body image, I think being exposed to all of these images of that are selected for the best, the most beautiful, the weirdest, the craziest all the time changes your perception of everything in the world. It changes your perception of the place you live relative to other places. It changes your perception of just kind of every aspect of life, even if you're aware of it. So I think that while it's hard to say like what will happen in terms of like they might be exposed to other social media anyways. And, is that better or worse? I don't know. But yeah, those are some thoughts that I have on the potential impacts.
Yeah, those are some great points, Seth. I mean, I remember I didn't get any kind of phone or social media until I had turned 13. So I was already outside of this age range of like 8 to 12. And I actually really appreciate my parents for, having the foresight and setting such a strict boundary because I mean, social media is such, a dangerous tool that there's a requisite level of maturity that really young adults need in order to use it safely. And that level we can't expect from, elementary and middle schoolers, and frankly, nor should we. Um, and I mean, if we take a look at some other platforms that have tried to create, specific projects geared towards kids, like YouTube for Kids, we see that they are wrought with errors because, in essence, social media wasn't created for 11 to 12-year-olds. It wasn't created for kids. When you look back to your childhoods and you think of the times that you hung out with friends, you weren't interfacing over a screen. You were hanging out at school or playing sports or just like biking around your neighborhood. These are some crucial experiences that a greater level of integration of social media in childhoods that would be prevented. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Adin. I completely agree with you. And unsurprisingly, I think Instagram for Kids is just a disastrous idea. I know I'm 21 and I can barely handle Instagram. I mean, it makes me sad and mopey and depressed. And, I already know who I am and I've worked through those kind of awkward, painful stages of puberty. So I can't imagine, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old having to go through that painful process in this like weird online cyberspace arena. And this became really clear when I worked as a mentor to middle school girls, so ages 12 to 14. And this is how I got into this whole issue, is because I realized how just depressed and anxious and lonely they were. And, talking to them, they all said the same thing. They're like, oh, it's Instagram, it's Snapchat, it's constantly being in this like public gaze. And despite knowing that, it was so hard for them to break free of that matrix. They felt like they had to be on it. That was what everyone was doing. That was just the way to live. So I think that even more than the documented psychological effects and all the studies, which are important and should be talked about, the very essence of the app is what's dangerous here. I mean, the app is about comparison. It's about judgment, of your friends and your peers and people older than you who maybe have nicer things or nicer physiques, and it's just all about external validation. It's not teaching kids this self-confidence and learning to value themselves for who they are, but rather how they appear on screens. And so the very fact of that, I feel like, should be enough to say, hey, this isn't what 8-year-olds should be engaging with on a daily basis. Honestly, I think it shouldn't even be what 12-year-olds or 13-year-olds or 17-year-olds. I mean, it messed me up for a while. So that's just my perspective.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with you, Lucy. I mean, from the ages of 8 to 12 and even to some of the later teen stages and earlier teen stages, it's all about really figuring about who you really are and forming your identity. And when you're consuming tons of content from other people that really put on the persona of not really who they are, it sort of sets this high expectation of what you maybe think that you should be, but it's sort of unattainable. And especially at an age like that, it does and probably will cause long-term effects of, am I good enough? Will I ever be good enough? And I know that I have a younger sister who over the pandemic consumed a lot of content, and me and my family, we were getting a little bit concerned because her her behavior was starting to be influenced by her content consumption, where she consumed content that was that portrayed children as being bratty or rebellious. She started to become bratty and rebellious, and so that is just sort of, I think, the kids sort of get their identities from consuming these massive amounts of content.
I definitely agree with what you're saying as well, buddy. And I think it's very concerning to consider putting young kids in front of a screen earlier than we have to. I'd also like to go back to what Seth was saying about this being a habitual behavior, because I think we're very quick to forget that social media is designed to be addictive. It is designed to keep kids kind of trapped, or just users in general trapped, always scrolling through their feed, always looking for the next thing. And I think that if we can recognize that and then realize that we are willingly and knowingly exposing our kids to this structure, it's something to be really concerned about. And then I also think that the implementation of Instagram for kids discourages kids from getting that real life, real time experience with their friends. So if they're becoming more and more glued to their phone and they feel like they are using their time on their phone to connect with their friends, they're less incentivized to go out, meet up with their friends, interact with them. And then we start to see some really concerning habits or behaviors develop that, again, are really difficult to break later in life, and really difficult once they become old enough to qualify for all of the other social media that will then be in their life. So I think it's super, super concerning. And while I do think it is good to have more control over what kids are able to see, I just think the age that they are shooting for is just far too young.
Those are all great points. I think you guys covered a lot of bases there. I am going to actually sneak in a quick follow-up question on that from the audience. And this doesn't have to be the full time answer, so you guys can make it a little short if you want, but we got a question from Jennifer Joy Madden. What are some signs people are mature enough to handle Instagram, do you think? That's a tricky one, so don't feel pressured to have an all-encompassing answer, but just kind of your first reaction to that would be great. Starting with Seth.
I am not sure. I mean, one thing is that I think that, we talk about not being aware that something's unrealistic. And I think that that's not the full story, because there were a lot of things when I was in my teens and online all the time where I knew those criticisms and I was like, yes, I know this is not a realistic representation of something. And that doesn't actually matter that much, I think, because when it comes down to it, if you're spending 90% of your time looking at something that looks a certain way and 10% of it in the real world, it will still subconsciously shape your concept of normality. And there's nothing you can do about that just by thinking about it, I think. So I don't know that, like, for me, I kind of wonder, like, why should there, why I don't personally see the point of Instagram to a large degree, aside from it, like, a lot of things being on it because it's there that are just like, now there's all this communication that just happens on Instagram for some reason. Yeah, but I think perhaps a type of sign would be like, what is it being used for, and is that use being self-regulated? Although that would be testing based on like already using it, but maybe there's other places to see that kind of self-regulation that would be visible beforehand.
Yeah, building on what Seth said, I don't really know if there are any very objective tells that someone's ready for Instagram. I think that it all comes down to how they use it, and if the way that they're using it is constructive to, like, their own mental health. Like, if they're able to self-regulate and set boundaries, like, oh, I'm only going to go on for this amount of time, or, oh, if I come across content that makes me feel a negative emotion, I'm going to first distance myself from the situation, get off of social media, and then just like really self-reflect and see why it made me feel that way. And I mean, just going back to our previous question, that's not something that you can expect from really young children. I know that when I joined Instagram even at 13, honesty has always been an integral part of my relationship with my parents. And it was really just like that foundation that enabled them to be like, you know what, Adin, we trust you. We trust you to be honest. So you can use social media at 13. But if there's ever anything you have a question with, or like if you ever feel a certain way that's, not positive, we want you to be able to come to us with that information. So it's basically, if the user is able to know themselves in a really profound way, and realize when they might need to distance themselves or seek help or something, and also which content or communities that they're putting themselves into, that would be the biggest sign that they are ready for social media.
Yeah, I really liked the whole know yourself part. And I think for me, sometimes I feel like some periods in my life, I'm still not mature enough for it. And so what I do is I look at my own motivations for engaging. Is it coming from a place of need, from a place of emptiness or dissatisfaction with other areas of my life? Because if it is, I know, one, it's going to make me feel worse. And two, it's not actually addressing the maybe lack of community I'm feeling, or lack of purpose, or lack of artistic expression. So I think like when people are old enough to realize, okay, or ask themselves, why am I doing this? Why do I want to spend 3 hours in front of the TV, but on my phone as well? Instead of just like letting themselves do it, I think that's really mature. And it's really hard to get to. And I never do. So, I have to kind of be a cold turkey kind of person and keep it off my phone like I'm a child. But I think just knowing your motivations is really, really helpful.
I would agree. I think that knowing your motivations and really knowing why you're using these tools such as Instagram would be extremely important. I also think that it's also extremely hard to break away from the addictive patterns that these social media apps create. Like Instagram is owned by Facebook, and Facebook in itself is extremely addictive. And has been proven that they collect millions of data points in all of their users and try to cater the content so that they will later on make a purchase or look at ads, which brings the company Facebook and Instagram revenue, which I think is sort of a disappointing reality. And especially because all of these algorithms, they do work and they work extremely well. And honestly, I don't think I would consider myself mature enough to use any of these apps because I don't think that I can resist these very complex AI algorithms that just keep me in the loop of consuming more content, and interlude within that content ads that may change my perspective on different realities.
I think that there's also just a level of self-restraint that is necessary when you start using these applications. And then in addition to that, there's also a level of responsibility. So in society, we have different ages in which people gain more and more responsibilities slowly. You don't just give someone keys to a car. You spend a year with a learner's permit learning how to use a car safely and appropriately. And I think like we are quick to overlook social media and realize like when you engage on social media, your actions affect other people as well. And there's a conversation that should be warranted about your behavior online, in addition to how you process others' behavior online. And I think we are just far too quick to write social media off as something that's normal or fun, and not really prepare people to go into the social media realm in a way that is healthy and promotes digital wellness.
Yeah, those are some great points. I agree with all of that. And one thing that I wanted to just quickly tack on to something Seth said at the beginning is we have evolved to really trust our visual input even more than auditory, because people lie to you, and we get that. But you can see it in colloquial phrases like the eyes don't lie, seeing is believing. Right. And so we have not evolved for this new internet landscape, and we still trust our eyes, even if we know, as Seth said, cognitively or intellectually, I should say, that this is not true. Intuitively, we still put all of that trust in what we're seeing as reality. And so I really resonated with that. Well, thank you guys for that mini question. And now we are going to shift over to screen time rules. This is something I'm very curious to hear young people weigh in on. Do you think screen time rules are necessary for children and teens? Why or why not? And we will start once again with Seth.
So I think that if it is possible to do something other than screen time rules, that is better, because I think there is it's so dependent on sort of parent-child relationship and all these kinds of things. But I think screen time rules can create this effect of kids going, oh, this is this cool thing my parents aren't letting me do, and I want to do it more. And rather than even having the opportunity to develop their own understanding of like why there would be screen time rules in the first place or what possible harms there could be from it. On the other hand, it's possible that it will take them, are they able to develop that understanding? I think it's possible I think a condition that would make it very hard is if their whole world is digital and they don't have experiences of other things they enjoy and things like that. And I think that's maybe becoming kind of common for some kids. And then they wouldn't have a reason to understand why they would want to limit themselves. But I think, if it's possible for them to perhaps be educated about the attention economy and how it works, and persuasive design and how it works, and kind of realize that that's underlying these things and be conscious of how they're using it. Again, depending on the kid and their maturity level, that could be preferable to screen time rules. But I think in cases where that's not an option, they could be helpful, especially if they're more specific to content and like what you're doing on a screen, because I think that's also important. Screen time isn't all the same.
Yeah, I mean, I can personally relate to what Seth was saying about how when you restrict it, it almost seems, it's like forbidden fruit. You all of a sudden want it much more. My parents used screen time and like parental controls on my first MacBook, which I got at like 12 years oldish. So I could use it for homework, but obviously I wasn't just using it for homework. And it almost became somewhat of a game to guess what password my mom had put for parental controls. And we would guess using the little hint that they have in case like you forget your password, something to jog your memory. But even physically, like my brother has struggled with a video game addiction. And so my mom has physically taken the remotes to our TV or the controllers to his Xbox and hidden them in places around the house. And again, that's just another game. So I feel like boundaries are an excellent thing to set in order to encourage a healthier interaction with social media. But parental controls may not be the exact way that we should go about that. Something that needs to be conveyed to the kids themselves is why the parents are trying to set these controls. Because I mean, we often see the results of that. We see the controls themselves, but we don't see like our parents thinking like, oh, I don't want my kid to be scrolling aimlessly on like social media for hours and hours and missing out on other opportunities like reading or hanging out with friends or playing sports. Or in other cases, having them access content that they're not ready to see. Like I remember my sister had a Google Plus account and she used it so that she could look up nail inspo. But she was able to like see some really unsavory stuff that is not appropriate for children to be seeing. And it was on a nail page. So it's not like she was even trying to see it. It's just like something that she couldn't control. So basically, I think that there's a necessary and honestly, in this stage, missing part of the equation where parents are conveying the need to their kids and also instilling in their children just like an understanding of why it's important to self-regulate.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, short answer, yes. I think that boundaries and rules for screen time are really necessary, but I also think that they aren't the only thing that you should be doing. They're like kind of the first step. The way I conceptualize this is like if you have a little baby and it picks up like a fork and is trying to play with this really sharp fork, the way you take that fork from the baby, you'd like switch it out for something like softer and nicer and safer for the baby. And so I think it's about not only limiting, but also enriching and adding to. So for example, saying like, okay, we're not going to do more than an hour of screen time, but we're going to go to the park or, you know, go to the library or sign up for musical instrument classes or sports or clubs. And I do understand that that's difficult for a lot of families, and that really varies with where you live and ability and things like that. But I was really lucky in that my brother and I, you know, we loved to read. We were huge nerds. We were always dropped off at my grandparents' farm, you know, and ran around and poked each other with sticks. And we had a lot more to do than just sit on our phones, or, well, we didn't have phones, sit on our little Nintendo DS playing Pokemon. So I think the key is just adding more, you know, instead of only taking away, making sure that like tangible physical enrichment is being provided to the kids.
Definitely think that's a really great point. Everybody that talked before brought some really great points. And I think Seth brought up the situation. It really does depend on the family situation. If the parents are always out and it's a single child, they may start to wonder, what do I do? You know, if you're at home alone, you're done with homework, and it's during the pandemic, there's not really that many options besides going on your screens. And what Adin said about the why, the why is extremely important, because if kids don't really understand, then there may be a large miscommunication about why the screens have been taken away. They might interpret the screens being taken away as, I am a bad child and therefore I'm being punished and my screen is being taken away. And I really like Lucy's point about not just taking something away, but adding something back. I think like the presentation of other attractive activities that are alternative to social media and other screen time mediums, such as the DS, is a really, really great idea. Being able to go outside if possible, being able to spend time with your family would help to bridge the connection as to why you should be off your screen, you know? You might get to the point where the kids are actually suggesting, hey, let's play board game. Hey, let's go to the park. Hey, let's go do something that is off of our screen. But I think it's also part of the parents' responsibility to be able to make time to actually do those things to assist their kids in breaking away from these unhealthy screen time habits.
I absolutely agree with that. I think in addition, while there are pros and there are cons to screen time, one of the things that is really important is how you frame it. So if you're to tell your child, you get an hour on your computer, what do you want to do with that? What are the things that you're going to do in that hour? So if it's just matter of fact, that's the time that you get, then the world is their oyster for that hour to use it however they would like. And you're welcome to engage in conversation with them about, what did you decide to do today with the time that you have? But I think it's so much more about normalizing their relationship with technology, not saying, oh, in an hour, I'm going to take it away from you. In an hour, you can't have it anymore. But instead saying, okay, in our schedule for the day, you get this hour. How did you spend it? What did you do? Is there anything you want to talk to me about? Did you learn something interesting? Things like that. So I think, like, as with all things, parent-child technology, it's really just how you frame it more so than it is about your intent to keep a kid away from a screen.
Did you want to add something onto that, Seth?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple quick things. One is just that I think a huge issue that can come up with screen rules is when parents are being super hypocritical. I've seen a lot of kids complaining about this, where they're saying, oh, my mom tells me not to play Minecraft, but she's just scrolling through Instagram and tells me she's working and won't even give me a hug. Like, so setting that kind of example, obviously not helpful and not great in combination with like trying to implement rules. And also just that kind of touching on what a bunch of people have brought up, I think an element of the allure of screens right now is that kids have so little freedom outside of screens. And so suddenly you have this realm where you can be competent and you can have freedom and have self-expression, whereas you can't like go walk across the street on your own, which was actually normal in other times. And I think that's another dynamic playing into this kind of restriction on what you can do outside of the digital world.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that a lot of parents' perception of risk is really distorted as far as how much danger their kids are in playing in the yard or walking down the street to the local park versus how much danger they're in jumping online into different forums where, there could be people that don't have their best intentions on those forums trying to get their information and things like that. And honestly, it's easier for child predators online. I think that has made the outside world safer because people are less likely to risk themselves going out and trying to, it seems to me, I'm not saying I've read research proving this definitively, but that's a lot riskier. Why would you go to a playground if you're a child predator when you can just try to groom kids online? So I think, but in parents' minds, it's dangerous out there and it's safe in here on the screen. So I also really loved Lucy's point, which a few people talked about adding in positive versus it just being a restriction. And I also thought, Kaitlyn, you brought up a really good point. You talked about it as framing, but what you were talking about, I think, goes even past that towards forcing kids to reflect on how they spent their time and how they might want to spend their time in the future. And I think that is a huge step that any parent can take, that, even before you're limiting screens, or if you're not ready to limit screens, a huge problem we have with screens is falling into unconscious consumption and getting into a pattern of asking kids and teens to reflect on their use and how they might want to change that in the future. I think really helps work against that unconscious consumption habit and is really powerful and valuable. And with that, I will transition into our last and, well, maybe last, we'll see if we have time for one more, but might be last question, which is, if you had a cousin ask you to decide the screen time rules for their 12 or 13-year-old, what rules would you put in place and what would you do to ensure those rules were followed? And I just want to add a quick caveat onto that, which is Seth brought up the point of maybe kids shouldn't have the screens at all. So if your answer is that I just would tell them no screens or no smartphones or tablets, I consider that a rule that you're welcome to say that as well. So.
That that would be my inclination, but it's so dependent on the specifics of the situation. Is this a kid who's had screens their whole life? Do they have other interests? Like, what kind of self-control do they have? I would definitely want to emphasize the angle of exciting them about other things more heavily than restricting things. And yeah, I think that's how I would approach deciding, but I couldn't say what my decision or choice would be.
And for this question, I do understand that there's great variation. We're going to assume that they have average self-control for a 12 to 13. We're assuming kind of you have an average cousin's child.
Yeah, well, I think, a person that's really missing in this equation of trying to set screen time rules is the kid themselves. With parents and children deciding upon a relationship for social media usage, it really has to be something that's symbiotic so that you have a mutual understanding of why these rules are being set, not just how they're being set or how they're being enforced. And so, I have to say that's probably one of the best things that my parents did for me. My mom read How to Raise an Adult and she took it as her Bible. And just really teaching us to become very independent individuals is something that allowed us to, you know, gain a level of maturity where we could engage with social media in a safe way, or at least be aware of the effects that it's having on us. And without, you know, engaging the kid in this like first step of like technology or social media use, when you're setting the initial boundaries, you don't really have the foundation for like an ongoing feedback loop. Like if something happens to, like Kaitlyn was saying, if something happens during the day, you want to be able to reflect, but also as a parent, you want to be there for your kids to like talk them through stuff and like just like have a greater degree of like understanding of like what your child is doing online. So I would say personally, I'm not the best one to provide insight into this, you know, situation, because I'm not the parent nor the child. So, I mean, I could make recommendations based on my own experiences, but I think that the best thing that the parent could do is to decide on something with their kids.
Yeah, definitely. I would hope that my cousin wouldn't ask me, because that's so much responsibility. But I think, just echoing what I said before, I would just ask, you know, are they involved in sports, in clubs? Do they have a lot of friends? You know, do they have any spiritual or musical activities? And then kind of go from there. Because I feel like happy, well-adjusted, balanced, busy kids are a lot less likely to get addicted. You know, just like we're less likely to fall into like sugar addictions when, you know, things are going well in our lives. And I think too, one good strategy could be the parent and the child working together to say, hey, we're both really tempted to overuse technology. Let's make a plan and hold each other accountable. Kind of going back to Seth's point, I think it was Seth that made it, about, you know, the hypocrisy in it, and making it like a family bonding activity to say, all right, we're both going to stick to this. It's not just me, it's not just you. And taking that kind of with the caveat that like everyone, you know, we're all kind of the victims of this really persuasive, addictive technology. And it would be really awesome if corporations could just like be equitable and fair and, you know, take people's best interests in mind when designing these things. So just like giving us all a little bit of grace and realizing that parents and kids are up against something that's a lot bigger and a lot, I don't know, smarter than we are, really. So just being forgiving with the kids and the parents when they're trying to navigate this whole process, I think is helpful too.
I would most definitely agree. And everybody had some really great answers. I think that understanding the familial situation is extremely important, because, you know, everything changes when your parents have to work a lot, or when everybody's in the house at the same time because of a pandemic and you can't go out. At that point, sometimes you may get tired of each other, but it's also very important to keep that bond. And a way to do that is to take time off from your screens and interact with each other in person. Even if it's a game that you're sick and tired of playing, maybe you can make an adjustment, make your own rules, because it's just you guys playing. And generally, I mean, I would expect there to be a balance between screen time and no screen time. But ultimately, I do really honestly think that it is up to the parents to help and encourage their kids who may not know better to really present them with other options as opposed to just being on their screens.
Yeah, I do agree with you, buddy. I think it's so important that you understand the kid that you're advising. I would say the only answer I feel qualified to give would be like a 30-minute screen time or 30-minute timer. But the reason that I feel qualified to give that is because that's my timer. Like that's the timer that I set for myself on all of my social media applications. And so if I were to sit down with a child and talk to them about it, I would say, this is what I do. And this is what I would recommend to you. But if I didn't have that personal experience, I wouldn't feel qualified to talk to them about it. So I think so much of it is communication based. And the more that you're able to communicate with the child, the more that you're able to really break through to them why screen timers are important.
Absolutely. Yeah, you guys all made good points there. So we have 5 minutes left. And what I was thinking is that we have time maybe for a mini question where maybe it'll be limited to 30 or 30 to 45 seconds. And what I'm going to ask you is, what is an aspect of screen time that you don't think gets enough airtime? What aren't we talking about enough when it comes to screen time? And I'll give you just a couple more seconds to think on this. And it's like another 5 seconds, and then we'll throw it to Seth. Thank you, Seth, by the way, for being our brave first responder for all of these questions, especially this last one.
Well, one thing that I think I could bring up is I feel that in the current narrative around, for those who are talking about how addictive these things can be, there's this certain helplessness, like, oh, these companies are so powerful. They know so much about us. Like, what can we even do? We're struggling against them. And on a certain level, okay, they have a lot of information. On another level, you have the power to turn it off and it's gone. It has no power over you anymore. And so I think that sometimes is missing. And just that I've definitely heard parents describe that, like, when they really do take this like no technology approach, that often maybe they'll go through a period of like the kids being upset about it, but then they get through that. And then it's kind of amazing because there isn't this constant like back and forth, like how much do we have, and like the allure, and there's time to discover other things. So I think that's one cool thing that's not talked about enough.
I'd say it's like this is touching on some stuff that other panelists have brought up earlier in the call, but something that isn't talked about enough is what the screen time is actually being used for, because screen time is not, uniform across the board. If you like set a screen time rule like on your computer or something, like it's different if you spend like 30 minutes on Khan Academy or like learning how to code on like Python or Java versus like going onto Instagram or like playing one of the IO games or something like that, or like Pop Tropica. Shout out to all the kids that played that back in 4th grade. But basically something that parents should convey to their kids is that there should be, a healthy balance between what you engage in. So like not using your time, not only for just like games and just kind of like, like an escape or a break, but also for like that intellectual enrichment or like finding stuff that you're passionate about, or like, sating your curiosity, stuff that will actually like help you as an individual and as a young adult.
That was so well said. Definitely well said. I'm going to kind of take a different direction. And this is something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately. And it's like the whole notion, when we talk about screen time, we usually think, oh, we're sitting down for like super long hours and just mindlessly scrolling. But I think something that's been bugging me lately is like email and notification culture, how like any sort of flow of attention is constantly interrupted. And I'm a workaholic. So, I'll see something and I'll open it up and start working on that and then go back and forth and back and forth. And it's difficult because it's not screen time like we're generally presented with it. Oh, you have no self-control. You can't get off the couch and off your phone. It's like, well, it's just the whole cultural pressure now is this immediate response. We expect when we text someone or call someone to hear back immediately and vice versa. And so I think that can really lead into this dangerous thing of, even if you're not on your phone all day, you're thinking about it and you're constantly like jerked out of the present moment because of those little pings.
A lot of really good answers, but I'm also gonna sort of break away from what everybody else has been saying. I think that instant gratification plays a large role in social media consumption. There's just tons of information online, and a lot of it is really good and can help you a lot, but it takes a longer time to get to that information and a lot of effort. And it often doesn't seem like it's going to help you instantly, which is for some people a major turnoff. And for apps and content mediums such as Instagram and all these social medias, they just provide you with a quick and easy access to information that has the illusion of being gratifying. And especially when you get a well catered for you page or feed, then it just feeds you information that activates your confirmation bias and feels gratifying. But I think that if you can really break out of that cycle, then tech can be quite a good tool.
I definitely agree with that. I also want to hop back over to what Lucy was saying for a second, because I think we don't account for texting when we think about screen time. So like when we're directly communicating with other people, how is that different? And then a lot of people use social media as a texting platform. Like people use, if you're on Facebook, are you using Facebook Messenger, or are you scrolling? Are you sending things to your friend on Instagram, or are you just scrolling mindlessly through Instagram? And I don't really know how we differentiate through those things, or if one is necessarily better than the other. But I do think that that's something that just does not get enough attention right now, because it's so easy to lump scrolling culture and like actual interaction together. And because it's harder to think about them as separate entities, we just don't. But that's something I would love to have talked about more within this community for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's a really good point. And I actually have read research that things like FaceTime are much more positive, less emotionally harmful, which I don't think is surprising to any of us, that if you're talking to a friend one-on-one, that has a very different impact to you than if you're scrolling and looking at likes on social media. So I think that's an excellent point. As far as how that could be addressed, I think tech companies could do a much better job of giving us, we know they have all the data on us. They could give us information about how much time we're spending scrolling versus messaging people on their apps. But the question is, will they? And the answer is, I'm not holding my breath on that one. But those were all really great points. And so much. You brought up so many nuggets that I wish I could respond to, but really the point of this panel was just to hear them, and our time is up, but it has been a pleasure. So thank you so much, Seth, Adin, Lucy, Buddy, and Kaitlyn, for joining today and giving us your quick takes. And with that, thank you also to everyone who was watching and attending, and have a great rest of your day. And don't forget to check out the rest of the upcoming Y4Y panels. It's the last day, so check it out. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.